All right then. Hey, Happy New Year. Welcome to TSG Live Talking Trains. I'm John, your every month host, and we have once again Jennifer Howell, the great Jennifer Howell, coming in
Howdy.
from Wyoming. So
Yep.
thanks for joining us. Thanks for being the superstar guest host once again. Really appreciate it. And I think we have a fun show this month. Our headliner is going to be John Crisanti, and he's been on the show before sharing his stunning photography. I don't know what else to say about it, but people will see. We're going to be talking about Montana Rail Link and the new book that he just came out with. I think it started delivering like within the past 7 days or something like that. So that's
pretty close, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can always post about online.
Yep. I think, well, since you're also a superstar photographer yourself, I'll be surprised if you don't have some good questions for John.
He has some great photos, I know, just in general, of like weather and trains all in the one scene. I'm really excited to see what he has to show in his book on what he was able to capture within like environmental shots with the train and all that cool detail.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, but before we get to the main event, we're going to talk about something that's kind of near and dear to me because I've been involved with it now for, I think, 4 or 5 years in one way or another. And that is the Layout Design and Operations Weekend. So I have some guests to bring on for that. So if we'll jump right into this, is that okay?
Let's do it.
We have Robert Bowditch. Hi, Robert. Welcome. And we have a guy who's been on this show and on this channel a number of times now, Seth Newman, my guy. So, guys, we have this really cool event. It was originally the Bay Area Layout Design and Operations Weekend, but I've decided that since we're doing it hybrid this year, I'm just calling it the Layout Design and Operations Weekend event because Bay Area really kind of pigeonholes us into the Bay Area. And really, with the virtual option, anybody from anywhere in the world can join us. And we're working really hard to make sure that that also is going to be a good experience. So anyway, that's what that's about. I'll bring up a little slide presentation and we can talk a little bit about it, probably for about 10 or 15 minutes. And then we'll go on to our main event, which is John Crisanti waiting backstage. So this is the Layout Design and Operations Weekend. It's happening February 2nd through the 4th. This is the in-person part of the presentation. We are going to be doing some virtual stuff for sure on the Friday, which is the 2nd, and on the Saturday, which is the 3rd. And I don't know for sure, but I think that Sydney, who's our top secret producer here, is going to be doing something for Sunday. I just don't remember if she told me what it was. And for those of you who know me, you know that my memory is so bad that she probably did tell me and I just forgot. So anyway,
you can sneak around and ambush people as they're operating on one of the layouts Sunday. That should be fun.
Right? Unless we're already home by then. Yeah. But anyway, so the main event really for the weekend is Saturday, at least for our virtual attendees. It's going to be Saturday because that's when the clinics come on. And that's what this slide is all about. We have, what is it, 4 or 5? Well, it's 4 clinics, I think, or 3 real clinics, the Layout Design Challenge, which Robert will talk about. But, why don't you guys take over a little bit here? I don't really know. I haven't seen these clinics, but I'm guessing that you guys all know who the presenters are and can speak to how good they're going to be.
Sure. So, historically, and this meet goes back into the early 90s anyway. I first got involved with them in the late 90s. It had been going on intermittently for a while. But by late 90s, we had pretty much settled on end of January, early February. And what we started out doing were a series of clinics on one day. They were originally mostly layout oriented, and then later we started bringing in more operations layouts, operations oriented clinics. And we would do tours in the evening, which for those who are around in person, we will have tours based in the Santa Rosa area. And, then still later we added op sessions on Sunday. And finally, around 2010, I think, we started to move the base around it. It had originally always been in Santa Clara, to different areas in Northern California, with the idea that we'd expose different layouts on the tours and the ops. Well, with the year we rolled around to the North Bay, the Marin Sonoma area, it quickly became clear that if we'd asked people to come up for the Friday night no-host dinner, they would all get stuck in horrible Golden Gate Bridge traffic. Now, this isn't an issue for the virtual guys, but it was pretty daunting for people who were going to drive in Northern California. So we started offering Friday afternoon tours so that you would come up a little earlier, beat the traffic, kind of start the party early, be around for the dinner, and get started. So with that little bit of history and introduction of the larger program, the clinic program, which is clinics, panels, and challenge, was originally the heart of the meet, and I think it still is. And of course, it's the part that we're going to stream because, people are all in the same place, which makes it reasonable for John to go out and do his magic. So what have we got? Well, Ray is, this is a new layout for him. So I think he's backdating a little bit, and it's interesting in that it's not a Northern California prototype. So this is going to be a new one for me. I'm really excited to see something new, totally new, that we haven't done before. Linton von Bereldingen is that's a real person, and he lives up in the Davis area, having worked a good part of his career in the Bay Area and also in Oregon. And several years ago, I was on a rail fanning trip with Lint and some other folks, and he just sort of went off riffing and gave us a little tour of Solano and Yolo County and all the agricultural industries that are still active, rail served today. And ever since, of course, I'd been after him to turn that into a clinic. And Cliff Linton, different Linton, took over the clinic program last year, and I kind of gave him some unfinished business. So I'm very, very grateful to both Lintons for bringing this in, because I think it's going to be a fantastic clinic. And then, there's lots of new techniques constantly coming along. 3D printing, laser print cutting, and for that matter, photo etching have all become much more accessible over the last several years, to the point where it's really something that can become a design element, especially when you're trying to fit structures into a layout, and that's always a bit of an art. So Doug's clinic, I think, is going to provide some great guidance for, those of us thinking about, I'd like to design this industrial area, but I'm not really sure how to build the structures for it. Here's some wonderful state-of-the-art stuff you can do. And let's see, Robert's involved with the challenge, and he'll spend a little more time on that. And we've also got a panel on operations. I think it's on starting operations, or was that last year? I'm a little behind on that.
Sounds like your memory's about as good as mine.
I'm getting up there. I spend most of my day trying to figure out where I left my glasses. Anyway, I'm very excited about the program, and I'm particularly excited that, we've got some new people rather than me doing it every year for 20 years, bringing some fresh perspectives.
Right. I'm sure everybody else is excited about not having to listen to you all day again, too.
Absolutely. because they know I can listen to myself talk.
Yeah. So I want to ask Robert about this because were involved with this layout design challenge, and for people who haven't been to the event or haven't seen the event, maybe just give people kind of a very brief example of what it means and what it is. And if you have an idea of what the challenge is this year, you can talk about that.
Yeah. So I should start off by saying this really is my favorite model railroad event of the year. And I make a point to attend it every year because I love the content. I love the people I get to meet. It's a really great experience because it pulls together a whole bunch of people with different interests who are all very focused on modeling realistic locations, understanding the history of the model railroad scenes that they're doing, and trying to reproduce those and figure out how to actually turn those into operations and turn them into the game of model railroading. And it's also interactive, that it's not just people listening to the clinics, but there's multiple places where we as participants, even if we're not presenting, are getting involved. And one of those is the Layout Design Challenge, which has been a traditional part of the show as long as I've been attending. And what we tend to do is we put out a set of design constraints. Can you design a layout for this particular set of physical constraints and for this kind of location? And we open it up. We get several people to provide sample designs. We let them present it, and then we can sort of compare how different people solve the same problem. This year, what we're doing is we're again doing a location that's relevant for where we're having the meet. So we are asking people to design particular layout design elements, that is a particular scene, for either the Tiburon Northwestern Pacific Ferry Terminal or for the Petaluma and Santa Rosa's Petaluma operations. And we ask people, what would you do if you had 32 square feet, if you had roughly a sheet of plywood you could cut in any way? How would you make that portion of a model railroad? And what are the parts of the layout, or what are the parts of the scene that you would absolutely capture? How would you do the track arrangements? How would you operate it? If you're interested in doing this, you still have time. You need to contact Bruce Morden. You'll find all the information about the actual challenge and how to contact him at the www.bayldops.com website. There's an entire page just on the clinic, or on the layout design challenge. And so if you're interested in participating in this and sharing your ideas, get in touch. We'd love to see what you can create.
Yeah, the layout design challenge to me is always interesting because it's not just someone presenting, here's what I did and why, but there's always questions in the audience. Well, why did you do it that way? Or had you thought of this? And I got to tell you guys, one of the very first things I was impressed with the first time I went to this event was that the level of knowledge in the audience is comparable to the level of knowledge in the presentations, generally speaking. But the most important thing, I thought, because we have seen this time and again on this very show, actually, Talking Trains, people who comment about, how do I get involved with operations? I don't know anyone, and how can I break into that scene? And this event, especially if you can come in person, is a great way to do that. The other cool thing is if you can't come in person and you can come to the virtual, you may well find someone who's on the virtual event who's near you who could also get you to break into op sessions. So that, to me, alone is probably worth making an effort to be there, either in person or on the virtual, because it's hard to get into operations, especially if you don't know anybody. And you won't know anybody unless you put yourself out there. I do want to make just a quick comment about the panel discussion. It's going to be about operations and new operators. And like I said, our top secret producer here on the show, Sydney, is going to be one of the panelists. So that'll be very interesting, I think, to hear, the perspectives of people that have been doing it for a while and people who are kind of newer to it. I mean, Sydney's been operating for a few years now, so she's not that new, but new enough to still have that what's the word for it? The green look, I guess, of someone who's maybe not as seasoned like Seth, who goes around operating everywhere all the time.
She remembers what's hard.
Sure, right, exactly. The other thing that we're doing is we have a bunch of, I'm going to call them door prizes. I mean, they're not, or raffle prizes. So there's going to be a drawing for that. If you can come to the in-person event, I'm also going to have a bunch of DVDs that I'll be making just as giveaways, because people in this area, in the Bay Area, know Caltrain is being electrified and all of their overhead wires are already installed. And I have a video that was the first ever video that I produced. It's about Caltrain, and it's before any of that stuff went in. So it's kind of historic that way. So anyway, we have one more slide and then we're going to move on here. This is the call to action. Has our date.
And we should also mention tours and operating sessions before we.
Thank you. Please do. There's probably stuff I'm forgetting. Please do if I forgot something.
Do you want to talk about that, Seth, or should I?
Go ahead and start. You're right there.
So once again, the great thing about the Layout Design and Operations Weekend is, it's traditionally been very interactive. And one of the ways, and a couple of the other ways that we do that is by having layout tours on Saturday night. And so we get to go and visit, in this case, about 7 layouts in the Santa Rosa area, self-drive. And then more importantly, one of the challenges when anyone gets involved in operations, as I did, years ago at this event, is we've not necessarily had chances to operate on large layouts. We're on different people's layouts. We don't know who to ask. And so one of the great things about the Layout Design and Operations Weekend is that there are, if you're interested, all attendees are invited to an operating session at one of the layouts in the area. And these are often layouts where it's hard to get access to, either because the owner has a set of regulars or there's a lot of demand to go to the layout. And so being at the Layout and Design Operations Weekend means that we can often get into these layouts that we might not be able to otherwise. We might be able to operate on larger layouts than just our own layout or one of our friends. And so as a way to get started, to meet people, and to get more involved in the community of model railroad operators, this is the way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, to just amplify that a little bit, these layouts or these layout hosts have agreed to open with the understanding that there will be a lot of people who are either first-time operators or don't operate very often. So it's an opportunity for people with no or little experience to get exposure to some very nice layouts. And there's a little bit of freedom to fail. We don't necessarily crank them up to full intensity. We have lots of helpers. We expect that people will be learning, and so you don't need to worry about feeling embarrassed if you're not performing at the level of somebody who operates very regularly. And the good news here is we've got a couple of large layouts that are excellent. Jim Providenza has been around for a long time, and Jim has always been a great host. The first time I visited Jim, he shoved a throttle in my hand, and that was my introduction to his layout. And I think only the second or third time I'd been on an operating layout. Also, Paul Weiss's just spectacular Central Vermont, which is sort of a unusual subject for Northern California, and it's beautifully done. Great opportunity to learn about a whole lot of interesting things. And then we've got a couple of other Sonoma area layouts that are certainly around, but generally aren't as exposed as much. Gus Campagna, Ernie Simard, Ed Marin. I think there's another one or two out there. Lots of choice. We may be able to add more if more people are requesting slots, and it's a good idea to actually register now, speaking of the call to action, because we're about to send that announcement of available operating layouts out, and you'd like to respond as soon as you can. Mm-hmm. So anyway, enough rambling by me.
Yeah, so the whole thing also, by doing it sooner, you get to take advantage of the discount, the early bird. I always hate those gimmicky marketing terms, but that's what it is, right?
You have little animated worms on your slide, for the early birds.
It's a discount, so if you can come, please do. And we've done this event virtually. I think this is the 3rd year in a row now, and I'm really excited about it because it's a chance to do something that I'm really passionate about, which is to bring the event that people can't get to wherever they are. And there's a lot of reasons why people can't get to events. I can think of 2 people right off the top of my head who are regulars at this event in person every year, but they can't go. So we're going to bring it to them. And I think that's something that we need to do more of as, organizers of these kind of events. So I'm really excited about that. So unless there's something else I'm forgetting, bayldops.com, please sign up, get in there on the early bird. You can attend from anywhere in the world. Feel free to sign up for the virtual one. We're going to have a great time. We've already got dozens of people signed up for it, so you won't be sitting in there by yourself. That's important. And join us and come have some fun. All right, then. Did I forget anything? Oh my goodness. Someone write this down in the calendar. I didn't mess up. Oh wait, Sydney's here. She'll know that it happened because she witnessed it.
Women always remember.
I know, and I don't. So that's the problem. Anyway, so thanks guys for taking the time, and I'm looking forward to having a great show this year. It's just a couple weeks away, so sign up now. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. And
that was cool. I learned a lot from that.
Yeah. I mean, this is such a great event. The first time I went to it, I was just like, wow, I didn't even know this happens. And here are these people doing this, and it's like super cool. So anyway.
That is cool.
Yeah.
I think it's right. It is hard to find ops and such, and just having this whole little virtual aspect is really cool too. I'm glad Sydney's able to do that.
Yeah, the virtual event is a little bit limited because we can't really do op sessions, but we always have a great time anyway. And the people who come to the virtual ones always come back.
That's cool.
Yeah, I really do like the fact that we're able to do it. So anyway, with that, why don't we bring on the main event, the headliner act, right? That was like, the old days. That was like Motley Crue opening up. And we're about to see Van Halen right now. So let's bring on
Eddie Van Halen.
Right, here he is. Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah!
Oh, sorry. it's really
I don't think I'm worthy of Van Halen. But
John Crisanti. Welcome back, John.
Thanks for having me back, John. It's good to be here again.
Yeah. So for people who don't remember, or maybe you're tuning in for the first time or something like that, this is John Crisanti, who is an amazing photographer, not just railroad photographer, but photographer, a lot like the person who's sitting next to me over here. But John goes out and makes books and stuff. Jennifer will. It's just a matter of time. John, you just finished just started receiving your new book about Montana Rail Link. And for people that are around on the internet like I am, they've probably seen the announcement. It looks pretty amazing, and I can't wait to see. Oh,
it is pretty amazing.
There it is.
Ooh, look how shiny and pretty.
It's
right.
Yep.
So is that your own copy?
Yeah, this is my own copy that I just show around the people, get them interested. And
did you autograph it for yourself?
No, I didn't.
To John, from John. So you have a little presentation with a bunch of stuff. Is it from the book, or are they?
Yeah, so it's basically a condensed version of the book, just to showcase of what to expect when you buy the book and
Oh,
all that. So
so what made you? Do you mind if I ask some questions before we open up the presentation?
go
Do we
right
have
ahead.
time? I didn't look at how long the presentation is. Are we going to be pressed for time or?
It should be under like 45 minutes or so.
Oh, okay. Then we
That's
have
not bad.
time.
It's good.
45 minutes to maybe an hour at the most.
I'm very curious because I've never been up to see Montana Rail Link, but just based on the few pictures that I've seen, just your pictures that I've seen, the scenery just looks absolutely stunning. And what made you decide? I mean, I guess that kind of answers the question I'm about to ask you, but what made you decide to do a book about Montana Rail Link?
So when the announcement was made when BNSF was going to be purchasing the lease from Montana Rail Link 2 years ago this month, actually, me and my good friend Kirk at Dubker Media, we both decided we wanted to do a trip up there because he hasn't been up there in a good decade or so, and I've never been up to the Montana Rail Link, even though it's a couple states away, but it's within a day's drive. And so we took our first trip up in February of 2022. And I'll go into Montana in the middle of winter, but it actually really wasn't bad up there. Just it was pretty cold, but not a whole lot of snow in February. But of course, the further north you go, it's either the days are going to be a lot longer or the days are going to be a lot shorter. So it was one of those things to deal with. And we wanted to cover a majority of the Montana Rail Link system between Billings and the western part of the state near Idaho. So we took a few days and did the best that we could to just document the whole road, because we weren't sure if we were going to be back up here or when BNSF was going to take over the railroad at the time. So we took a few days and just covered each sections of the railroad. So like Billings to Livingston, and then out to Helena, then over Mullen Pass, and then we moved further west towards Idaho, out towards Missoula, where MRL operations start to get a little bit thinner, where it's mostly just BNSF traffic. And the only thing out there is the daily gas local that serves the ConocoPhillips facility 7 days a week. And so we were able to get a lot of really good content on that trip. And then on the way home, I just pondered to myself, I'm like, I could probably come back up here and just eventually do a book on this, because another thing that like astonished me was there's not that many publications out there about the Montana Rail Link. Just like doing a simple Google search, there's a couple of books, but they're pretty outdated, like either from like the early mid 2000s or even back in the 90s before the mergers. And there's obviously plenty of quality video content out there with C Visions, Dubker, and 7 Idea Productions. But I felt that I think the Montana Rail Link deserves to have a more modern presentation, publication in the rail fan community, just because of how popular it is and obviously the country it goes through.
Cool. Well, let me bring this up here, and we're going to see some of this, because even just the cover, the cover shot of this thing is amazing.
I really enjoyed all of John, what you've posted on your personal Facebook page and such about your book so far, and just the photos you've shared with us. So I appreciate that.
It was a very like stressful project for the past couple of years, but I'm very pleased at how it came out, and just excited to share it with everyone in the rail fanning community.
This picture, John, is so good. I could go away happy right now.
So this shot, this was my summer trip last year, or in 2022. So I went twice in 2022. I went in the winter and went in the summer. So I decided to go on the longest day of the year, the first day of summer, so I can get as much as daylight as possible I can up there, being so far north. So this was my first train of the day, and this would be one of my last shots of the first day. And I was just pretty much just telling myself, like, how can I top this? Like, it's a classic Montana rail link shot of climbing Bozeman Pass, just west of Livingston, with some classic SD40s.
Did you have help, like someone that knew the line and where the good shots were? Or how do you research that?
So I'm in the Montana Rail Link Facebook group. It's mostly with a lot of rail fans, but there's also a lot of MRL, now BNSF employees in there.
Oh, cool.
And then just using Flickr for shot ideas, and then a lot of Google Map work went into this. And luckily, the MRL isn't too remote. It actually follows a lot of main highways or roadways for most of the system. So you really don't have to hike into a lot of places. It's literally stop on the shoulder, get out, get your shot, and then that's about it. Or just find a grade crossing.
Wow. So there's a road right behind you in this shot, or what?
Yeah, there's a public grade crossing right behind me in this shot.
Wow. That sounds like a great place to go chase, well, BNSF trains now.
I mean, most of the traffic, most, like 90% of the traffic for a while has been BNSF. So I think that's part of the reason why there was an agreement to sell the lease back to BNSF, just because most of the overhead traffic was BNSF at that point. Because the railroad only had 2 road trains between Laurel and Missoula, and then the rest were basically locals that worked during the week.
Very cool.
I feel like when looking at that shot, we should see like a deer at any moment to come running by.
Right.
It's funny you mention a deer, because there is a shot regarding a deer that's in the book, but it's not.
Oh, awesome.
So just a quick summary of people who don't know who I am. My name's John. I currently reside in Colorado, about 45 minutes north of Denver. I live right next to the former Colorado and Southern BN Denver to Cheyenne line, which is now BNSF. I pretty much got the train bug when I was pretty little, about 5 or 6, and I've always had it since. And I've always lived here all my life and just been accustomed to both BNSF and Union Pacific trains, along with a couple of short line and regionals that we have out here. But for the most part, I've always been exposed to just the 2 major Western railroads. And obviously I never got to experience the Montana Rail Link much sooner than I wish I should have, being it's only like a 7 or 8 hour drive, if at that, just to the railroad. But I'm glad I did. And I'm also a railroad employee with Amtrak as well. As my full-time job, I work out of Denver as a station agent. So if you're ever traveling on the California Zephyr, come and say hi.
Direct all your complaints to John at Denver.
You should. No, just kidding.
I want to say something, John. I think you did the right thing, because with so many of these railroads, they're gone. And once they're gone, that's it. You can't go back and take the shots anymore. And, like nowadays people complain, oh, the new locomotives, look stupid or whatever. Those same people were complaining when the diesels were taken over for the steam engines. And then every time a new generation of diesel comes out, they're the same people that complain about it. But the fact is, you can't go back. And how many of us would like to be able to go back 30 or 40 years and document Southern Pacific over Tehachapi Pass, for example, or over Donner Pass, or any of the like well-known stuff? You did it. You went there and documented MRL before the BNSF takeover or, realignment, whatever you want to call it, was completed. So, I think people in that respect owe you a debt of gratitude for documenting it. So you did the right thing.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, I've already answered the question is why I did a book, but
sorry,
it's all good.
I didn't know that was going to be in there.
All right, so just a quick brief history of the Montana Rail Link. It's started out as the Northern Pacific Railway when they first constructed their railroad across Montana in 1883. And up until the 1970 merger, where it became Burlington Northern, it was just all Northern Pacific. They transported lots of passengers, and especially in that part of Montana, it's very mining based. So there was a lot of copper minerals stuff coming out, especially in the Butte area, just south of Helena. So that was one of the big commodities the Northern Pacific had. And then after the 1970 merger, where it became Burlington Northern, the BN had two transcontinental lines stretching across Montana. You had the Northern Pacific down to the south, which composed of not one, not two, but three steep mountain passes. You had Bozeman Pass, and you had Homestake Pass down to the south towards Butte, and then you had Mullen Pass. And that created a lot of challenges, especially on Mullen Pass and Homestake Pass being a ruling 2% grade. While as the Great Northern Line up to the north over Marias Pass was a little bit steeper as well. And so in the 1980s, the Burlington Northern was downsizing some of their rail network, both in North Dakota and Montana, and I believe in Washington State as well, to short lines. But the biggest one would be turning the Northern Pacific main line in Montana over to a new railroad, which has been known for years, the Montana Rail Link, which went into operation in 1987 by a guy the name of Dennis Washington, who owns mining, construction, and marine companies, but he also owned a couple of more railroads on top of that. He still currently owns the Southern Railway of British Columbia in near Vancouver. And then he also operated for a short time the IMRL, the INM Rail Link in the Midwest, which was former Milwaukee trackage, and then that got folded over into the IC&E and eventually the Canadian Pacific. But up until now, the biggest operation in Dennis Washington's outfit, or Washington Corps, that is, was the Montana Rail Link, and that composed of the Northern Pacific Main Line from Jones Junction, just east of Billings, Montana, all the way up to Sandpoint, Idaho, where it connects with the former Great Northern, now BNSF Northern Transcon, between the Pacific Northwest and Chicago. So working from east to west, the Montana Rail Link officially started at Jones Junction, which is the junction with the BNSF's Forsyth sub, which eventually ends up into Glendive and heads into southern North Dakota. And about a few miles to the west is Huntley, where the former Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy route from Sheridan and Gillette, Wyoming, come in off the Bighorn sub, and that's today one of the main coal artery routes to and from the Powder River Basin to customers either in the northern part of the United States or the Pacific Northwest and Canada. And then moving further west, we get closer into Billings, the state capital of Montana. And this is where the MRL operates a pretty decent sized yard, but they also have a lot of industry, especially out near East Billings and Lockwood. Their main commodity was gas refining and petroleum coke. So you would notice that there is a lot of tank cars, but also open top hoppers that are filled with petroleum coke, and those get shipped out to various parts of the system. So you'll see them going to the Pacific Northwest. We get a lot of those down here in Colorado, and they go to all different points. So in most cases, they're usually in those GATX open top hoppers.
So are those going to be further refined in other places, basically? Or
I guess it goes. Petroleum coke is used like in the steel industry or something along those lines. You'll get. I know BNSF runs a unit coke train from time to time. I actually got to see one on the first MRL trip. It's pretty cool. It looks like a coal train, but it's with all the old school looking hoppers. And that train usually runs between Laurel and somewhere up in Washington State. And then mostly down here, they just get shipped in carloads. So they usually just end up in the mix of merchandise trains, per se. And then going west from Billings, it's double track. It follows the one of the main arteries between Billings and Laurel to Shiloh and then Moss Main. And Moss Main is the eastern end of the yard where the former Great Northern Line from Great Falls comes in. And that's where trains going to and from Signal Peak Mine up near Broadview come in from. That gets a lot of traffic. And then you got some trains that go up to Great Falls and then even all the way up to the High Line or Marias Pass, per se, in Shelby, and you'll get some export grain trains as well from the CPKC from Canada. And then Laurel, did you have something, John?
No, it's okay.
So, and then Laurel Yard is the big and main yard in Laurel. That's where MRL makes up the trains. They do the switching as well for both them and for BNSF traffic as well coming into the yard. Both BNSF and Montana Railing crews are based out of there as well. And like I said earlier, the MRL only really had two road trains. It was LM and ML, which stands for Laurel to Missoula and Missoula to Laurel. And those basically shuttled cars to along the route and dropped off local stuff like in Bozeman, Livingston, sometimes in Helena, and then those cars ended up in Missoula and vice versa. And then it wasn't up until I'd say the past couple or so years, the MRL started a new local turn that operated between Laurel and Bozeman and back, that usually had a crew call time of about 4 p.m. So they usually were out of Laurel within a half hour or so. Not so much of a great chase during the winter months, because by the time they get out, you only have a little bit of ample time of chasing. But in the summer, you could chase them all the way to chase them all the way to Bozeman, but you could also start chasing it back east back up towards Livingston. And then West Laurel is where the other CB&Q line comes in from Grable and Casper, and that's the line that goes through the scenic Wind River Canyon, just north of Casper near Thermopolis, Wyoming.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the locals in Billings consisted of a lot of GP9s that were acquired right after the formation of the railroad in '87, and your most common power is gonna be the Jeep 9s, and then you'll get the Jeep 35s thrown in, and sometimes the SD40s as well. But this is near downtown Billings, just west of the Northern Pacific Depot. Just working a cut of looks to be like some scrap cars and a couple of tank cars on the east side of the yard.
It seems like, as I'm seeing the pictures, that they really operate over a lot of flat land, don't they?
Yeah, because this part of Montana, the railroad parallels the Yellowstone River a lot, but then once you get closer to Livingston, then you got a big mountain in front of you. So that's when the railroad has to deal with dealing with mountain grades. So I mean, it's not consistent. There's bumps, but for the most part, it's a pretty flat railroad, depending on which part of the system you're on.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so this is a little bit further west from the previous shot. This is the eastern end of the yard. Same GP9. And like I said earlier, the biggest commodity in Billings is the refinery producing LPG and petroleum coke, as you can tell from the large amount of tank cars in the yard in the background.
Mm-hmm.
So shifting further west, this is Laurel, the main yard. This is MRL 256, one of the yard jobs, just shuttling around, doing different assignments. This is just along Main Street on the northern part of the yard.
Did you have a scanner to learn about which trains you were looking at, or did you have knowledge from the social media groups that you're in?
Mostly the scanner, just because I really didn't have too much like sources online regarding the MRL. It's basically just here's what the timetable is, here's the radio frequencies, and this is when such and such is usually called out and all that. So
this looks like newer power on these. Are those newer GEs, or what are those?
So this is West Laurel. This is the Laurel to Billings turn that I mentioned about that started up within the past couple or so years. Usually it's either the bigger SD70 ace power and SD40 power that they throw on.
So they have all EMD then?
Yeah, it's an all EMD roster. The train on the train on the left is just the BNSF loaded grain train that just happens to have run through CSX power.
Very cool.
But yeah, this is the Y with the Casper sub. The west leg of the Y is in the foreground. So if you're coming from the west, and if you're going to go south, you just take that, and so on and so forth. So the second subdivision is a pretty long sub. It's over 220 miles. It goes between Laurel and the state capital, Helena. for the first segment of the subdivision between Laurel and Livingston, it's basically a river route at that point, just because it follows the Yellowstone River most of the way. So it's pretty fast running. Thankfully, Interstate 90 is along the railroad, I'd say most of the time, and a couple of frontage roads too here and there. So it makes chasing a train pretty easy, and being able to access all the most of the spots. So leaving West Laurel, you got Sperling, which is a area with a set of tracks where trains would come in to get inspected, or say the yard's not ready for them yet. So once you leave Laurel, you're going to see like a couple of yard tracks, and you wouldn't be surprised if you saw a train tied down there waiting for a new crew.
It looks like the second sub has a lot more what I'm going to call stations on it. Is it that much busier, or that's a lot of business, you know?
I mean, most of these are just passing sightings.
Oh, okay.
So like Park City is, for example, is one, Rapids, Columbus, Craver, so on and so forth. And then, yeah, pretty much everything is all a passing sighting, and there's really nothing substantial until you get to Livingston, where the locomotive shop is located at the base of Bozeman Pass. So the helper locomotives get serviced there, and all the local power from Bozeman and Logan gets shuttled there at the end of the week to get inspected, and so on and so forth. Or if any other MRL power needs to get worked on, it goes to Livingston. And that's the base of the helper operations for Bozeman Pass. So, and then leaving Livingston, you start up the 1.8% grade immediately, and it follows Interstate 90 pretty much all the way to Bozeman, so it'd be hard to miss a train. So there's a passing sighting on each side of the hill. Muir is the one on the east side. It's right before the summit and the tunnel, and that gets used a lot either by helpers or light trains. And then right on the other side of Bozeman Tunnel is West End, appropriately named, and that'll sometimes get used, but usually, at least the last 3 trips I was up there, I didn't see any meets there. And going down the west side of the pass, it's a little bit steeper. It's at a 1.9% grade all the way down into Bozeman. And then Bozeman, very populous city. It's one of the key entrances to Yellowstone National Park. You got an airport there and all that. So Bozeman has a small yard, but they also have a local based out of there as well, and that usually serves the industries west of Bozeman out towards Belgrade and Manhattan. And then sometimes it'll go out to Livingston and serve a lumber facility or a logging facility that they have on one of the older branch lines that went down to Yellowstone. And then leaving Bozeman going west, it's pretty fast running all the way up to Logan, which is the point where the 5th subdivision splits off, which is the former Homestake Pass line. That diverts off on its own and heads down towards Whitehall, and the line technically is intact all the way to Butte, but it's only in service up until Pipestone, which is a rock facility. I'll go into that a little bit more later. But Logan also has a local based out of there themselves, and that usually just goes down the 5th subdivision and serves the amount of industries that they have on that line. And then continuing west, the railroad meets up with the the Missouri River, which is near where it meets up with the Missouri River, which starts nearby at near Three Forks. So a little history lesson. That's where the Missouri River actually starts at.
Even just looking at this map and the prior map, I never envisioned Montana Rail Link being as expansive as it is or was. I just thought, Red, I just thought for some reason, or I imagined it in my mind, having never been there. I don't even think I've ever been to Montana, to be honest.
It's a pretty big state. Like it takes a while to drive through.
I imagined it as just going across Montana and, hauling coal or something, right? I never knew that it was this expansive. That's learning a lot already. This is cool.
Yeah. So
how long would it take just to drive one end of this to the next end, just on this map, just that section?
I would say without stopping, maybe about 4.5 hours.
Oh wow! So to actually stop and catch trains, that's a lot more time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So continuing west, the railroad goes through Clarkston and then enters the scenic Lombard Canyon, where the Milwaukee Road Pacific extension actually crossed over the Northern Pacific there. The bridge abutments are still there and all that, so you can tell where the Milwaukee Road crossed. And then after curving through Lombard Canyon, the railroad exits out and enters the town of Towston. And then between Towston and Helena, it basically parallels US Highway 287 pretty much all the way through Townsend and then over Winston Hill and then through Louisville, East Helena, and finally the division point at Helena. So this is obviously West Laurel, but this is a different day. This is the that Laurel to Bozeman turn. Here they have a single SD70 Ace and a couple of rebuilt SD40s for power with a pretty decent size train for what it is. It's usually not too long, but it still has a decent amount of cars to make for a good size train.
Did you see the question pop up on the screen?
I will be selling books at the Rocky Mountain Train Show this year.
Cool. Is that the first weekend in April?
Should be. I think it's April 6th and 7th, maybe, or 7th and the 8th. I can't remember which, but I know it's either one of those.
Yeah, I think it's the first weekend in April. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to make it to that this year, so I'll miss you there, John.
Oh man.
Yeah, 6th and 7th. So weekend of the 6th and 7th.
Yeah. I'm looking at my calendar now. It should be the 6th and 7th. It's a great show, by the way.
Oh yeah, it is. So this is west of Sperling and Park City. This is another Laurel to Bozeman local. And one thing I want to mention is I wouldn't have gotten so much content if it wasn't for this train. I'm not going to lie, just because I mean, it was a regularly scheduled train, and you knew when it was going to run and all that. So
yeah. So being someone who has done videos on similar things, I get it. I mean, the very first video that I ever shot was Caltrain. I mentioned it earlier in the show. And one of the decisions or one of the reasons why we decided on Caltrain is, well, it runs on a schedule. So when you're going to see a train. It's much easier to predict than just going out and trying to catch a freight train randomly someplace. So I get it.
Yeah, because the train was the crew would always go on duty in Laurel at 4 p.m. and usually they were out a little bit after 4:30, and usually they would have a pretty straight shot going to at least Livingston. So once they got out, it's nonstop chasing pretty much.
Yeah, and pick your spots. It's coming, right?
Yeah. Like you're not going to get every single spot, but at least know which spots you definitely want to get.
Yep.
So this is
Oh
a
wow.
little bit further west. This is the town of Columbus, and that's the Yellowstone River. This was the first for the first day of summer. So, like how I mentioned, going back to the previous shot, it's almost dark in the last one, and that train was further east than this. Here, it's you got plenty of sunlight to play with for a good few hours. But yeah, this is curving out of town along the Yellowstone River. We had a pretty healthy sized train, and I was glad that I was able to get a couple of well, a rebuilt SD40 and then the railroad's only SD40-2.
Question for you, John.
Yeah.
When you shoot your scenes like that, what kind of lens do you prefer to use?
I mean, it really depends on what kind of composition I'm wanting. Like, do I want, like, if I want to show more of the scene and have less of a compression, I'll go with a wider lens. If I want to do a scene like this, or maybe something a little more compressed in, then I'll use a zoom lens, preferably between the 24 and 100 millimeter range, but still be able to get the surrounding scene.
One thing I really like about this one is that it shows pretty clearly how the tracks follow the river. Pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's I think it's 45, 55 mile an hour running for most of the way too.
Do they cross the river much on the line? Like, are there some cool
There's
bridges?
a couple of bridges. I know there's one near Reed Point. That's where the railroad had that derailment last year over the summer, where it closed that part of the railroad down, so there was not much going through there. And then it crosses it again in Livingston, on the east side of Livingston. So it's it crosses it a couple of times.
Very cool. I don't think I've ever seen that second unit before. Is that a special paint scheme on that one?
Yeah. So this is the railroad's ML train, the Missoula to Laurel road train, and that usually sports a couple of SD70 Aces. The second motor is a veterans unit. It's basically a wrap, just to commemorate the veterans in all the military branches. And they have another locomotive similar. It's thanking the workers, employees. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to see that one, since that was, I don't know where it was at the time. But I did get plenty of shots of the veterans unit, though, since it was moving back and forth on the LM and ML trains. So this is near the passing sighting of Quebec. That's the Yellowstone River, nice and frozen back there in the middle of February. And then on the left is Gray Cliff Road, and then you can see Interstate 90 right in the back with the semi trucks and cars. So you can see how easily accessible the railroad is in terms of chasing it. So, and then this is further west. This is just east of the town of Big Timber, and this is another ML train with a couple of pairs of Aces. And the mountain range in the background is the Crazy Mountains.
Love it.
I'm not sure how I got that, but it's pretty crazy looking.
I was gonna say, bro, that's crazy.
Definitely one of the classic shots on the eastern end of the railroad.
This is the same shot that we had on the podcast this month, isn't it?
Yep.
Monthly catch. I think so. I remember Crazy Mountains being in it.
Yep, that's the shot.
I have a question that's going to sound like a stupid question, but I have to ask it anyway. How, with all the good shots that you get, how do you decide which one to put on the cover?
It's a hard, like that was, it's one of like the most, it was like one of the most difficult things that I had to do going in this project was, okay, what screams classic Montana railing, but what would also make a good cover shot? Because I mean, it's kind of hard to take a bad photo of this railroad per
Yeah.
se.
Well,
So it was one of the most difficult things in trying to choose a cover photo.
it seems like you'd have one going from left to right because the cover right is on the far right side and it could wrap around the book if you wanted it to, but like this one would have to be disqualified. As gorgeous of a shot as it is, the locomotive's on the wrong side.
Unless you did a landscape type of book, then.
Huh.
And this is a little bit. This is further west near Elton. This is right off the interstate ramp with frontage road, and that's the Yellowstone River in the background. And you can see a little bit of the crazy mountains peeking out right above the interstate. And then this was a very short Laurel to Bozeman turn with the same set of SD40, 40-2. This would be my last shot in 2022. And I was also thinking that would be my very last shot of the Montana Rail Link.
Wow.
Fortunately, it wasn't, because I went again last October.
You have shown what the true beauty of this line really is with different types of backgrounds. I'm glad you did a book on it and took the time to travel out there so often.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a reason why they call it Big Sky Country.
Yeah.
I guess that is the big sky, isn't it?
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
So jumping ahead, this is the eastern end of Livingston. This is the that same ML train that we saw earlier at Quebec. They're just leaving Livingston here after. I think they dropped off some cars at Livingston, or I think they had a locomotive too that they dropped off for the shop there. But this is the eastern end of the long siding that they have there, and sometimes you'll get westbound trains parked here waiting for to get their helpers attached for Bozeman Pass. And you can actually see in the background what the railroad has to face up ahead, and that's Bozeman Pass itself. So this is in the town of Livingston. This is what was the Livingston Rebuild Center. After the MRL started, they ended up using the former Northern Pacific Burlington Northern shops as a rebuild center on top of just like a locomotive and car repair facility. So for a while, they rebuilt older locomotives, and you may have seen it in older shots, but it's those rebuilt C36-7s or Super 7s. They kind of have a blue and yellow scheme to them, and it says LRCX on it. That means it came from the Livingston Rebuild Center. And a lot of work went through this place with rebuilt repair work being contracted out to them. But eventually the rebuilt center closed down, and the only thing that remains is the current operating shop complex that MRL, now BNSF, uses to do locomotive repair work. But at one point in the late 80s, early 90s, for a while, this would always be packed with different locomotives waiting to be worked on or be repainted, so on and so forth. So Livingston is home to the Bozeman Pass helpers, all manned helpers, since all that extra power is not needed elsewhere, just for the hill. So the railroad has, I believe, 2 helper sets stationed out of Livingston. It's usually a pair of SD70 Aces and a rebuilt SD40. here, and on this particular helper set, the middle unit is the railroad's only SDP 40. It used to be a passenger unit. At one point, you can see the smooth square backing on the back that housed a steam generator to for the passenger cars at one point. But once Amtrak took over the passenger service in 1971, the steam generator was removed and it essentially just became a freight motor at that point, just a straight SD40. And not a lot of these were produced. I think I want to say over 15, 16, 17 of these locomotives were produced ever by EMD. Most of them were for the National Railroads of Mexico. And then the rest were for Great Northern, which then eventually bled to Burlington Northern, and then some went to BNSF right after the merger. And obviously the 290 here got sold to the Montana Relic, and it's been on the railroad ever since, either in road service, local service, or in this case, in helper service.
That's a pretty rare catch, considering all of what you just said.
Yeah, there's really not that many. I don't know, not that many left operating in the United States. I think there's still some in the still wearing the Kansas City Southern Mexico Southern Bell scheme, since some of those went to TFM at some point down in Mexico, and then obviously when Kansas City Southern purchased the TFM, those got thrown into circulation. So I think some of those have gone up into the United States, but for the most part, if you're looking to get an SDP 40, the MRL was the place to go see one.
Yeah. You said that these are helpers, but I don't recall hearing, are they cut in the front or in the back as pushers, as DPUs, or how do they do that?
So these are manned with the crew. For Bozeman Pass, they'll get tacked onto the rear of the train.
Okay.
So they'll just shove them up the grade, and once they get to the summit at the tunnel, they'll just unhook on the fly with the aid of helper link, which is that it's a mechanism that's on the front pilot of the locomotive, and it's radio controlled, so the engineer can actually tone up a certain number sequence. After a couple of seconds, the device will go off and it'll actually pull the coupler pin, and that eliminates having a crew member to come out and pull the pin while the train is still in motion.
Yeah, that would be dangerous.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I mean, I've never known of a modern road to use manned helpers. That's interesting.
It's still pretty common out here, at least on the BNSF side. I know up in Crawford Hill, they still use manned helpers for the grade between there and Belmont.
That's cool.
Same concept, except they just use 2 locomotives, but they still use the helper link system. And then down here in Colorado, sometimes they'll use manned helpers between Denver and Palmer Lake on the joint line for like grain trains, and sometimes coal trains will need them too, but I've mostly seen them on grain trains, and it's the same concept as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, you learn something new every day. I mean, I just kind of assumed they would have been automated DPUs.
So there's that shot again. Figured I'd throw that back in here again. This is at a place called Hoppers. It's a few miles west of Livingston, just right off the interstate and frontage road. And that's the Livingston Peak in the background right above the second locomotive. So it's a lot of, like, I've been showing a lot of MRL, but like I said earlier, 90% of the traffic on the Montana Rail Link is BNSF, and a lot of the traffic is usually mixed. You'll get merchandise traffic, you'll get a lot of coal traffic, and you'll get crude oil as well from North Dakota, and then sometimes you'll get intermodal traffic in as well going to the Pacific Northwest. But this is one of the many coal trains going up to, I believe, either Roberts Banks in British Columbia, Canada, or one of the Centralia, Washington trains. And these trains usually average about 120, 135 cars, and they're usually powered normally without the helpers, 3 up front, 1 in the back. But in this case, they have 3 helpers on the rear shoving just to get over the hill. So like for example here, this is the view looking the other way from the previous shot. This is a loaded ethanol train going up the hill, and this is one of the helper sets assisting the BNSF train up the 1.8% grade. And it's quite
Sorry.
I was just going to say it's quite a show, because you got everything's in run 8, everything is screaming, and it's quite a show.
How long would you have to stand there, wait with your shot all set up, ready to go, waiting for the train? Like, did you know it was coming, or did you just know it was going to be there at some point?
Yeah, so usually what I would do is, because it takes a while for a train to get started and to get out of Livingston. So there's a nice parking lot with some benches right next to the Northern Pacific Depot in Livingston, trackside. So it's pretty, and that's where trains usually would stop to get their helpers tacked on. So that would always be a good waiting point to know, like, hey, we got a westbound coming in, they're going to get helpers added on. And there was really no rush at all up the hill, because they're going to be crawling up the grade. So you can get them leaving there at the depot, and then you'll just go up the hill and just sit and wait until they got there.
Well, that's good, because some of these shots, it looks like, gosh, how long would you have to wait there? A couple hours?
It does look like one of those places, doesn't it? Like, oh, I got to go to the bathroom now, or I'm getting hungry, you know?
Yeah.
Right. So this is the other side of the tunnel. You can kind of see it where the cut gets narrower there, and that's where the current Bozeman Pass tunnel is, and where the summit is. You can kind of see the grade starting to crest a little bit once you look towards the back of the train down to the head end. And the older Bozeman tunnel is still there. You just can't see it because it's behind a couple of pine trees in the train. But it's right around. That's where the old Bozeman tunnel is, and the current one's right there. But this is coming up to the siding at West End, and there's a sign here stating this top of Bozeman Pass, where Lewis and Clark traveled over, right next to the tracks. So down in Bozeman, this is one of the locals I mentioned. This is the Bozeman local getting ready to depart to go west to work at Belgrade, Manhattan, and I believe Logan. And then in the background is one of the cranes that the MRL used for loading rail and scrap and all that. And here you can actually see a couple of sticks of rail attached to the magnet. They're loading that gondola there with some rail. And this was basic, and the 2 Jeep 35s here was the normal power for both the Bozeman and Logan locals. A lot of different heritages on them. The 405 is a former Denver and Rio Grande unit. You could actually see where the Mars light used to be, right on the nose here. So that was a dead giveaway. And then the second unit doesn't have dynamic brakes, and it's a former, I believe it's a former Detroit, Toledo, and Ironton locomotive. So one of the cool things that the MRL had was they acquired a lot of secondhand locomotives. So there was you would get a lot of locomotives that would have a variety of heritage.
Does your book cover a lot of that type of history stuff in detail, or is it more of a picture centered book?
So I do explain that, and then I also explain the details or like the history of the changes of the logo, because it changed, I believe, 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And then I actually break down what each piece of the paint scheme represents as well.
Huh.
So it's not just like a pretty photo book. It has history information about the railroad, but also information regarding the company's paint scheme and logo itself.
Mm-hmm.
So this is Manhattan, and one of the cool things about the MRL was they really didn't have PTC at the time. So a lot of the searchlight signals were still intact and in service on most of the railroads. So it would getting a searchlight shot with a train was pretty easy to do. So
Do they,
this is
do they
this is
run
it.
dark when the block is unoccupied?
Oh, I'm trying to remember. It's been a while, but yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah, just curious. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, and then so this is a westbound BNSF Autorack train. They picked up a couple of MRL aces in Laurel, and I guess they're shuttling them west, either to Helena or Missoula. So it was kind of neat to see MRL power thrown into the mix. But as you can see down here, they were starting to get ready to do some new signal work. So after the announcement was made and all that, the railroad started replacing all of the old searchlight signals with more of the modern tri-light hooded signals.
Mhm.
So there was a lot of work being done, and obviously it looks like tie work was getting ready to be done as well. So this is Logan. This is the Logan local coming off of the fifth subdivision. Power on this is generally a Jeep 35 and a rebuilt SD40. They mostly serve Three Forks, one of the big plants. They have a big customer down there. There's another customer down in Willow Creek, and then Whitehall is another place that they serve. But yeah, the fifth sub diverts off here, and it's on the left, and it eventually goes down to Homestake Pass and eventually in the Butte. And then the track on the right is the second sub, which eventually heads up into Helena. And then this is the other side of Lombard Canyon. This is the passing siding of Winston. This is the LM train, the Laurel Missoula Road Freight. They're taking the siding here to meet a eastbound mega-sized grain empty. And the reason why I say mega-size is they combine 2 regular-sized grain trains together into one train.
Hmm.
Which was a pretty common thing up there when I was visiting the railroad. They would do that with both empty grain trains and I believe empty coal trains as well.
But only empties, right? They wouldn't try to run a loaded one.
No, they didn't do loads. They just did empties.
Yeah, I saw one of those, and I'm sure. Well, it was hoppers. I didn't pay attention to what kind. I think it was a coal train that was on its way out of Denver on the BNSF along Highway. I don't remember now. It's the one that's east of the main highway that we would normally take, that the UP runs along, where the BNSF is.
Mm-hmm.
And it was literally two empty unit trains stuck together. And it had two head end, if I remember right, two head end, four in the middle, and then two on the back end. That's how I knew it was two trains stuck together. And it was long. I mean, it must have been 3 miles long. That thing was just a monster.
Yeah, I saw a couple of the mega grain empties last October. It was pretty interesting. It was like 2 motors up front, 4 in the middle, and I think 1 in the back.
I like what you did with the sign here, framing the. Is that the veterans unit that you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, so like like I said earlier, the veterans unit and that other SD-70 Ace at the time of our visit was in pool service on the LM and ML trains. So it was every time we caught this train, it would always be the same power. And then this is the same train again, a little bit further west. This is just west of the passing siding called Louisville. You can see the searchlight signals back here protecting the west end of the siding. So, reaching Helena, that's the vision point, but also a crew change point for the railroads. So crews would operate between Laurel and Helena within their 12 hours of service. Helena is also home to the helper base for Mullen Pass, which is another spectacle of its own. Like Bozeman was great, but Mullen Pass is even better than that. It's quite a show. And then Helena also has a local base out of there that serves a cement plant down in Montana City off of one of the branch lines that I'll discuss later. And then it also serves a hopper facility out in Townsend on the second sub. And that's usually a weekday type of ordeal. And power for that's usually a GP9 and a rebuilt SD40 for that. But so moving west from Helena is Helena Junction, and that's where all the helpers get added on to the trains, all the westbound trains. And you asked earlier if helpers got put on the front, got put on the back, or they got cut in. Well, here at Helena Junction, most of the time, I would say 95% of the time, they'll get cut in to the middle of the train. And that's where the helpers get added on. But also Helena Junction is where BNSF's line from Great Falls come in, which at the moment is currently out of service due to, I believe, a couple of rock slides and all that. But so leaving Helena Junction, trains begin their climb immediately on the 2% grade through Tobin and up through Austin. And then trains negotiate a couple of horseshoes through the Iron Ridge, and they go over a couple of trestles, the Greenhorn Trestle and Skyline Trestle, before reaching the top of the summit at Mullen Tunnel. Once they get over the summit, they'll go through the passing siding at Blossburg. But the helpers will stay on the train from Blossburg all the way down to Elliston to provide extra braking for heavy trains. And then at Elliston, the helpers will get cut off, and then they'll return east back to Helena to help another train. And then west from Elliston, it's pretty fast running all the way through Garrison, which is the junction with the BNSF Copper City sub from Butte. And then from Garrison, the railroad parallels the former Milwaukee Roads Pacific Extension right away, pretty much all the way to Missoula. And the railroad also parallels Interstate 90 all the way. So these are the helper sets, or at least two of them. There's at least four helper sets. Here, one of the helper sets is leaving the engine facility and headed out to Helena Junction to station for a westbound train that will be departing soon that will need helpers. So you can actually see where the grade begins for Mullen Pass. This is near this is Tobin, but you can see Helena Junction right back here. That's where the helpers get tacked on at. And you can kind of see it right here. The man helpers cut into the this BNSF manifest train. And this is just another example of how the helpers get cut in for the trip over Mullen Pass. This is MRL's LM train going through the searchlights at Tobin. And then further up the hill is Austin. For the most part, it's pretty easy to access most of Mullen Pass, at least during the summer months. During the winter, it's pretty difficult, at least to get to Skyline Trestle and all that, just because of the snow. But this is a westbound grain train going along Austin Road and coming up to the siding at Austin. And then this is the view looking the opposite direction. This is another BNSF manifest train with a helper set helping them up the hill. And then in the background here, you could actually see an eastbound grain train waiting for this manifest train to pass by. And then this is Skyline Trestle, the one of two trestles on the hill. This is just a westbound BNSF manifest going over the trestle. And then this is Blossburg. This is the western side of the Mullen Pass. The tunnel's just right around the corner here in this cut. And there's also the point where the railroad crosses the Continental Divide as well. You can see a sign right here dictating that. And then this is a little bit further down at Blossburg. This is just west of the grade crossing. This is the LM train coming down the hill. I believe they're meeting an eastbound here. So like I mentioned earlier, during the visits up there, the railroad was doing a lot of signal replacement work. So this is the west end of the siding at Blossburg. They were installing the brand new tricolor hooded signals in favor of the older searchlight signals. And then, like I mentioned earlier, Elliston is where the helpers get tacked off. So the train will pull forward past the signal to about where the helpers are at. They'll unhook their cut, then the helpers will come out and then proceed into the siding to clear, and then the first half of the westbound train will back to its train, hook on, and proceed on west, and the helpers will head back to Helena. And this is Garrison. Sometimes the LM/ML trains will do work here. Here, I believe they were doing a pickup of cars from the BNSF. And then back here, you could actually see where the Milwaukee Road was at. And this is just a little bit further west. This is, I think this is Bonita. This is between Missoula and Garrison. One of the couple of tunnels that are along that stretch of railroad. And then this is the eastbound ML train. So we're in Missoula. This is their yard where they and crew change point, but they also where they do inspections and all that. And this is where the ML train originates and the LM train terminates. Now, this is also where the gas local originates as well, to and from Thompson Falls on the Fort Sub. So the train on the left is a BNSF intermodal mixed train doing its inspection before getting a new crew. And then this is ML getting ready to depart for Helena and eventually Laurel. So the Fort subdivision, it's obviously a little bit less MRL, except for the gas locals. Everything else is BNSF. So the Fort subdivision is basically a fast running river route. There's really no steep grades per se. But from Missoula to basically St. Regis, the railroad parallels the Clark Fork River, but also parallels the former Milwaukee Road right away as well. And then from there, it takes a longer cutoff along the Clark Fork River to Paradise, where the original main line comes in, which is the 10th sub, but it's also the steeper route. And then from Paradise, the railroad basically parallels the Clark Fork River pretty much all the way up to into Idaho at that point. And then crossing into Idaho, the railroad comes up to Lake Pandarel, and then eventually joins with the BNSF main line at Sandpoint Junction. So this is the gas local. This is the night gas version of this train. It goes on duty, I believe, every day at 4 p.m. And it usually takes the 10th subdivision up to Paradise and eventually to the ConocoPhillips facility in Thompson Falls. And power for this is always a pair of SD70 Aces, and usually a pretty healthy sized train of tank cars. So going west, the train's loaded, and then coming back east, the train is empty. And then this is a little bit further west on the Fort Sub. This is the small town of Lothrop. Just an eastbound manifest train meeting a westbound loaded grain train. And then this is the night gas local along the Clark Fork River near Don Lane, or west of the siding of Toole.
Yeah, another shot that really shows it hugging the river.
Yep, and it's right off the road too. You can see the road paralleling right here, and it's basically a guardrail shot. And then this is a little bit further down. This section of railroad is pretty neat because the highway and the river, they parallel each other, but when the railroad was built, they literally just did it as a straight line. So it goes over the river numerous times on bridges. So it makes chasing a little bit difficult because you're curving a lot, but the train is speeding along in a straight line. So it makes chasing a little finicky per se, because here they're normally doing 45, 50 miles an hour. So this is further west on the Fort Sub. This is Plains, just west of Paradise. This is one of the classic shots, MRL shots up there. This is the day gas returning back to Missoula after doing work at the facility at Thompson Falls, and that's the Clark Fork River. And west of Thompson Falls, the railroad's still parallels the Clark Fork, but it also goes by Knoxon Reservoir, and there's a lot of inlets to different creeks that come from the reservoir and the Clark Fork, so there's a lot of bridge opportunity shots as well in this part of the railroad. But like I said, it's pretty fast pace running here. They're normally doing 45, 55 miles an hour through here, so it looks like mountain railroading, but it's pretty fast mountain railroading.
Well, that's why they built them straight, right?
Yeah, it's a well-engineered railroad, I will admit. They did a good job. So this is Hope, Idaho. There was a lot of traffic, like eastbound traffic that day. So I really wanted to get a westbound shot with the late afternoon sun, but a lot of the westbound trains had to wait for, I guess it was like a fleet of 5 eastbound trains. Because I went during the fall grain rush, so there was a lot of grain trains at the time. But regardless, I wanted to get this shot of the cantilever searchlight signals here, because who knows how long it's gonna last.
Yeah.
If they haven't been replaced already. And then this is Sandpoint Junction. This is where the Montana Relic and the BNSF both come in together, and it happens to be right at the Amtrak depot as well. This is where the Empire Builder does their station stop. I guess at the time when I visited, they were doing some platform work, so they installed a temporary platform at the time. So the 5th sub, it's the line that formerly went over Homestake Pass. Homestake Pass briefly has been out of service since, I believe, 1983. It's due to its severe curvature and steep 2% grade. It just wasn't worth maintaining when Mullen Pass is directly to the north and it's much more favorable. But this is pretty much just a secondary main line. It sees a local, and depending on that time of the year, you'll get ballast trains too from Spire Rock and Pipestone. But it's a pretty scenic route. It goes down to Willow Creek and eventually meets the Jefferson River, and then from Sappington it goes through the very scenic Jefferson River Canyon and then onto Whitehall. And here the railroad also parallels the Milwaukee Road between Three Forks until about after the canyon. So that's the Logan Local coming around the curve at Three Forks. And then this is much further. This is west of Sappington. This is basically the entrance to Jefferson River Canyon. And you could actually see the Milwaukee Road right away, right across the river here as well. And then this is the canyon itself, one of the many angles in the canyon. This is the local returning back from Whitehall going to back to Logan with a couple of hopper cars. And you can kind of see where the Milwaukee right-of-way is, or currently is, and you could actually see some code line poles still up as well. So the 10th subdivision, it's the original main line when Northern Pacific built its railroad in 1883, but it had it suffered a steep grade. It had Evero Hill, which is a 2% grade on both ends. It's a short, but it's a steep grade. But it was also a shorter route between Missoula and Paradise. And this is mostly directional running. They usually send the eastbound lighter, like empty unit trains this way, and the gas train usually operates in both directions on the 10th sub. So between the Smet and Evero, it's pretty slow running with a lot of curves in the steep grade. And then by the time you reach Arley, it's pretty much fast running all the way to Paradise. So this is on the southern or the eastern part of Evero Hill. This is just outside of Missoula, just west of the Smet. This is the night gas, slowly climbing up the 2% grade. And then this is the top of Evero Hill, that Evero. This is the day gas returning to Missoula. And there's a lot of Indian reservations up there as well. And I guess the reason why the gas train exists is a pipeline could not be built through the reservation or something like that between Missoula and Thompson Falls. So Montana Rail came in and decided, hey, we'll shuttle the gasoline for you between Missoula and Thompson Falls, and they do that twice a day, 7 days a week, instead of using a underground pipeline. So this is a little bit further west. This is that's the Flathead River. It branches off the Clark Fork at the Paradise, and this is near the railroad location of Perma. This is the eastbound day gas train returning back to Missoula. And then this is Paradise. This is where the 10th sub and the 4th sub come in. You can see the milepost changes. Milepost 219 is on the left, and that's counting up from Helena. Whereas on the 10th sub side, where it's still jointed rail, it's milepost 64, and that's just counting up from the Smet. But this gives you an idea of the junction of where both rail lines come in. And then the 13th sub is just it's a very short branch line that gets served by the Helena local during the week. It goes down to a cement plant in Montana City. So that'll usually get cement hoppers and sometimes coal hoppers as well. And that's powered normally with a Jeep 9 and a SD40.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the local leaving East Helena with a cut of loaded coal cars with a GP9 and the railroad's only SD40-2. And then this is a little bit further east. The same local returning back with a cut of empty coal hoppers. And then this is the cement plant in Montana City that sees a decent amount of rail traffic. And the second unit on the train is the railroad's only active pure SD45 locomotive. So it still has its 20-cylinder 645 prime mover in there.
I'm looking at that industry. That looks like a great industry to model, doesn't it?
It would be, yeah. Like it would be a great operations thing because you would have a lot of car spotting to do, and then you also have coal cars and cement cars to switch out to.
Yeah.
So, and then that's a snippet of my book. If you would like to order it, it is definitely available on Amazon. You can order directly off of there, and they'll Kindle or print it and ship it out to you. Now, if you want an actual copy from myself, I do have more books on order, and you can order directly from me, and you can also get it signed as well.
Autographs.
Yep.
You charge extra for that, right?
Nope.
Oh, dude, you missed out on a great opportunity. You missed a great chance.
Oh man.
So I did not count how many pictures were on this slide presentation, but how much does that, like percentage wise, of that is in the book? Is it all in the book, and how much more is in the book?
Most of this is in the book. Some of this is not. I'd say this is about, I want to say 20% of what's in the book,
Oh wow,
maybe less.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a pretty thick book. I was hoping I
Yeah,
had one here so I could
yeah.
thumb through it on camera.
Yeah, it's
How many pages?
188 pages, so it just has a lot of different photographs. I did include the maps in this presentation, but one thing that I did not include, but it's also in the book, is like locomotive information, like specific locomotive information. So like I talk about what is in the help, like what they use for helpers and all the, and then I also include hand-drawn grade charts as well for both Bozeman and Mullen passes. So you could actually see what the ruling grade is, how much elevation each certain section is, and all that.
So we have a question about if you're going to do a calendar for Montana Rail Link, because I know you do calendars.
I mean, it really hasn't crossed my mind of doing a calendar, but there's always that possibility I could do one.
It seems like you have the material for one for sure.
Yeah,
that's really cool. How much do you charge for the book?
The book is $90.
Okay. Yeah, boy, that's a lot of great imagery and a lot of great history. Thank you so much. You know, it's funny, this whole time in the back of my mind, right? I know this is a class 2 railroad, but somehow, and for no reason really, it seems like it's bigger than I thought. But I know it's class 2, so it's a big railroad. I mean, it's the only thing bigger than a class 2 is a class 1, and we know those are, you know, entire continents. So, well,
so like for like the whole class 1, class 2 thing, it's not necessarily the size; it's how much revenue the railroad brings in.
Okay.
So the MRL brought in enough revenue to where it's considered a class 2 railroad. It didn't bring in enough to be classed as a class 1 railroad,
right?
Per se. But yeah, they have a lot of trackage, but that's the amount of revenue and profit they're bringing in.
Do you know how much power they had in their fleet by the time it came to the end?
They still, I mean, they're still using them today, but as of right now, they still were using the rebuilt SD40s, that SD40-2, all of their SD70 Aces that they have, and then they obviously have those GP35 locomotives, the GP9s, and then the railroad also has a GP40. They're only GP40, but that's usually based out of Missoula on a local. So, I mean, it's the roster is still still has some variety, but it's not what it used to be, like even say like 10, 15 years ago. Because back then you still had a lot of SD45s. You still had some SD45-2s. And then even going back further, it was basically the rainbow era of the MRL. MRL would just patch stuff, but you would get so many paint schemes from other railroads that they purchased these from. And it was just a variety of different motive power.
Yeah. Do you know if BNSF is just patching all the MRL stuff, or are they going to repaint all that stuff, or do you know what they're going to do with it?
Nobody really knows at this point. I know it's part of the BNSF deal that they're going to get this power, but I mean, there's still Burlington Northern, and then there's still Santa Fe Power still roaming around, and the merger was in 1996. So I honestly don't see them repainting the MRL power anytime soon. Maybe patched, but I think the bigger question is how are they going to handle the operations with the helpers. What power are they going to keep? Like specifically, are they going to keep the GP9s? Are they going to keep the GP35s? And a lot too is at least with the SD70 Aces, half of them, they were ordered in 2005, 2006. So that was before the isolated cabs became a thing. And I guess according to some employees, they're non-crash compliant, so they can't lead. And obviously none of the power has PTC on it. But I get what the newer Ace order that they had within the last few years, those have the newer cabs, and those will probably get positive train control installed on them, so that way they can lead not only up there eventually, continue to lead up there, but also be roaming the BNSF system.
I remember reading somewhere some discussion that people were having about BNSF. I think the prevailing opinion of the experts on this social media thread was that BNSF should just keep all of the MRL stuff, not the power or anything, but the employee and operations infrastructure in place, because they already know what they're doing, and it would be dumb to reinvent the wheel.
Right. I mean, as of right now, they're still operating under MRL rules and timetables, but that's going to transition over to BNSF next month on the 15th. But I mean, as of right now, it's almost like nothing has changed, with the exception of the dispatcher names are now BNSF instead of MRL. And then the MRL power, for the most part, is still in where it's at. Although, however, the gas train yesterday and today was actually BNSF power. But they threw in a MRL SD70 Ace in today, so it was 3 locomotives. But
I guess for those watching, it'll just be interesting to see how it unfolds.
Yeah, because I mean, nobody really none of the employees really know either. So it's just a wait and see kind of ordeal.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, Jennifer, you're looking like you have a question, but I'm not sure.
I was wondering, how many of these trips were you up there with Dub Kerr Media?
Just one.
Wow. Okay.
I was with him on the first trip in February of 22. Okay. And then I went by myself in June of 22. That's pretty much just when I covered Laurel to Helena and Mullen Pass. And then I decided I needed more content to finish this book. So last October, I flew up to Spokane, Washington, and rented a car and pretty much covered the last bit of stretch between Missoula and Sandpoint just to finish out this book. And
wow, that's dedication right there.
Right.
and it's beautiful country, so you got to go back regardless.
It's well worth the extra effort to go back up that way, I think.
I still plan on going back regardless of it being all orange. It's the scenery is second to none. It's beautiful up there.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to share this. I'm really looking forward to thumbing through this book eventually and seeing all the great pictures in it and reading about more of the history. Because, I joke about this all the time. My memory is terrible. So when I read it, it'll be like learning it for the first time, but it'll sound familiar because I've heard it here.
Right.
But thanks, John. I really do appreciate that. I'm looking forward to seeing what else you end up doing. Do you have any plans for like another book about something else, or are you not working on books right now?
Not at the moment. This one was just my biggest project, and I think right now I'm just gonna hold off on another book just to get this out there and
just enjoy it.
Yeah, you're gonna have a lot of time spent doing all the autographs from all the sales.
I know, right? You're gonna be so famous.
What you need to do is hire someone that can forge your autograph so you can just, get them to do it.
I know, right?
Cool. Well, with that, I'll say goodbye and thanks again, John. I hope to see you sometime soon. I'm sorry we'll be missing you at the Rocky Mountain Train Show, but just so that people know one more time where they can get the book, Amazon, I put a link in the description of this video, which, by the way, is an affiliate link. So if you want Amazon, well, I'm not going to get into it. If you want Amazon to make just a little bit less money, you can click on the affiliate link and order it from them. Yeah. It doesn't change the cost of the book or the amount that John gets, but just a little bit goes to TSG Multimedia. Affiliate link. Yeah. And then, of course, from your website, johncrisanti.com, that would be for the autographed versions of it that we're joking about here. And just want to make sure to plug that one more time. Montana Rail Link. Cool. All right, then. Thanks again, John. I'm going to put you back in the basement and we'll close out the show here.
All right. Thanks, guys, for having me.
Thank you so much. And if I could figure out how to do it, there it is.
Hey, it's your show. Show this, man.
As many times as I've done this show, you'd think I would have it as muscle memory, but hey, it's only once a month, and I just got done telling you how bad my memory is.
That's true, right? I bet Sydney loves that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's nice. Every morning I wake up to it next to a new person. So.
Like 50 first dates.
I do want to mention just quickly, I like to, at the end of this show, talk about what's coming up. So this weekend, we have part 3 of the garden scale Blue Nami and battery conversion on a Bachmann Climax. And this is the one where we actually get it running. So if you've been following that project, it's a good one, because up until this point in the series, it doesn't run right. And when we went to do the final episode of the series, it was still having trouble. And thank goodness, the guy that helped me with the project, Trevor Park from the Fern Creek and Western, is like a wizard with these locomotive garden scale stuff. He's done, dozens of battery conversions, and he got it to run. Oh, I'm doing a spoiler. Sorry. You'll have to watch to see if he got it to run.
You didn't hear that. Just scrub it from your brain.
Yeah, right. Well, people that watch the podcast know that it ended up running because they've seen it run. Anyway, Jennifer, thank you so much for
Thanks for having me again.
For being the co-host. Yeah, I got to figure out what I'm going to do next month. You might get a call. Oh, but we have these events coming up. We talked about the one, this afternoon. That's the Layout Design and Operations weekend coming up in a couple of weeks. And, next month we're going to be ramping up for the PCR. That's the Pacific Coast region of the NMRA. We're also doing a hybrid event for that convention that's coming up in April. So cool. I'll probably have, some people talking about that. And the other thing I need to keep in the back of my mind is that we had such a great time when I did the show about podcasting that we wanted to do another one of those. So I got all these things going on in my brain.
That was a fun one to watch.
Yeah, I really had a lot of fun doing that one and learned a lot and met some nice new friends that I didn't really know. I mean, I knew of them, but didn't know them before that. And, that's one of the great things, as we always say, about the hobby in general, is meeting a lot of nice people. So
isn't that the truth?
Yep, sure is. So is there anything else going on with you that we should cover before I hit the music?
If someone sees me in Amherst, say hi.
Oh, because you're going.
Yep.
Are you going? Is John going too, or is it just you?
No, just me and Michelle are going together.
Oh, that's going to be a lot of fun. I really wish I could go.
A lot of people from Meet and Greet will be there, and from other areas. It should be pretty fun.
Yep. And that's the one. It's in, what's it called? Springfield or something, where they have. Yeah.
I leave next week.
Oh, cool. Well, tell you what, depending what happens here in the near future, if you'd like to come back on as a guest co-host again, or even as a guest, if you take a bunch of pictures over there, you'd be welcome to come back and share your experience.
Let me see what kind of content I get while I'm down there, and I'll let you know.
All right. Well, with that, then that'll do it for this episode. I thank you again, Jennifer, and
thank you.
Thanks. Right. Thanks. You're welcome. Thanks to John for coming on. Thanks to all of our great moderators on the channel, keeping the keeping all the chatters in line with a whip. You know, don't talk about that. Stay on topic. And like I said before, Happy New Year, everyone, and we will see you next month.
Bye.
Bye.